the conflicts between India and Pakistan, gold, and the Chinese yuan, three seemingly unrelated elements are, in fact, undergoing a fascinating interplay. This year, we may well witness a significant breakthrough in the internationalization of the Chinese yuan. I'm aware that when the topic of the yuan's internationalization comes up, many might dismiss it as a fallacy. They argue that due to China's strict foreign exchange controls and the yuan's lack of free convertibility, the idea of internationalizing the yuan is nothing but wishful thinking. We've repeatedly heard so-called economists, often holding titles like chief economist at certain investment institutions, parrot this view in various forums. On the surface, their arguments seem plausible. However, the free convertibility of a currency is merely an important factor in promoting currency internationalization. It has never been a sufficient condition, let alone a necessary one, for a currency to become international. Any major transformation in the international monetary system is inevitably the result of great power competition, and such competition hinges on a country's comprehensive strength. In other words, the sole decisive factor in whether a currency gains international recognition is a country's strength. All else is secondary. Only when a country's strength reaches a certain level can improvements in financial factors help accelerate currency internationalization. These financial factors act as a catalyst, enhancing the process, but are not essential prerequisites. When we talk about a country's strength, economic strength serves as the foundation. Only with a robust economy can a nation participate in and sustain great power competition. Without a strong economic base, it's impossible to develop advanced technology and military capabilities. Military strength, on the other hand, represents the ability to seize the fleeting opportunities in great power competition. The ongoing India-Pakistan conflict is a prime example of how China has effectively capitalized on such an opportunity. Let's take a look at how the US dollar achieved internationalization. First, consider this graph, which compares the economic strength of the United States and the United Kingdom. To briefly explain, the vertical axis represents the ratio of US data to UK data. Taking real GDP, for example, the black line, you can see that by 1870, the US real GDP was almost on par with that of the UK, a ratio close to 1-to-1. Subsequently, the US maintained rapid economic growth. By the 1930s, the US economy was more than 3 times the size of the UK's. However, it wasn't until 1944, towards the end of World War II, when the Allied forces had achieved a decisive strategic advantage, that the Bretton Woods Conference was convened. This conference established the US dollar's status as the international currency, officially replacing the British pound. Looking at another graph, it becomes even clearer that before 1947, 90% of the world's international currency reserves were in pounds, while the US dollar accounted for less than 10%. Even though the US economy had far surpassed that of the UK long before, there is clearly a time lag between a country's economic size and the international status of its currency. Now, when some people say that after years of talk about the internationalization of the Chinese yuan, there hasn't been much progress and dismiss it as a joke, they simply lack an understanding of history. History teaches us that major changes in the international monetary system are always the outcome of great power competition. Only when the competition between major powers is resolved can the outcome of the currency war be determined. A closer look at the history of the dollar's internationalization reveals 3 crucial stages. In each stage, we can observe that both military strength and the backing of gold played vital roles. The first stage was when the US was rapidly growing in strength. During World War I, the US accumulated vast wealth by providing loans and supplies to the Entente powers, transforming from a debtor nation to a creditor nation. By 1919, the US held more than 40% of the world's total gold reserves. At that time, although the UK was still nominally the global hegemon, known as the empire on which the sun never sets, its economic and military strength had significantly declined. The US, through war mobilization, built a massive industrial capacity and military force. However, at that time, the US was not yet recognized as having military hegemony, and there was no significant gap in military strength between the US and other countries, which is somewhat similar to China's current situation. The second stage was when the US formally established its military hegemony, leading to a complete restructuring of the global power structure during World War II. Militarily, the US utilized its powerful industrial production capacity to help the Allied forces win the war, thus establishing military hegemony. Economically, the US implemented the Lend-Lease Act, which provided large-scale military aid to its allies. This act authorized the US to supply war materials such as weapons, ammunition, food, and industrial equipment to allies like the UK and the Soviet Union, with a total value of about $50 billion. Adjusted for purchasing power, this is equivalent to about $800 billion in military procurement today. Most of these aids were provided on credit or as gifts, but were to be repaid in US dollars or resources after the war. In this way, military strength was closely tied to the economy. Weapons were exchanged for resources, much like the current situation in Ukraine. European countries, in order to purchase American military supplies, were forced to transfer their gold reserves to the United States. By 1945, the US held 75% of the world's official gold reserves, paving the way for the third stage, the establishment of the Bretton Woods system. Under this system, the US dollar was pegged to gold, using the credibility of gold to back the dollar and ultimately gaining global acceptance. There's actually a fourth crucial stage, the Marshall Plan in 1947. On the surface, it appeared to be economic aid, but in reality, the aid was disbursed in US dollars. What could recipient countries do with these dollars? They could only use them to purchase American goods. In essence, this was a massive export subsidy for the US, smoothly transitioning its wartime economy back to normal. It also accustomed European countries to using the dollar for transactions. Looking back, we can clearly see that in each significant phase, military might and gold played indispensable roles. This explains why the remarkable performance of Chinese weapons in the India-Pakistan conflict is so crucial for the internationalization of the Chinese yuan. The outstanding display of Chinese military technology has sent shockwaves around the world. On May 8th, The National Interest, a highly influential right-wing magazine in the US, published an article declaring Pakistan's overwhelming victory in the conflict and analyzing how Chinese missiles defeated the Indian Air Force. The article emphasized that the performance of Chinese weapons in this real-world combat served as a wake-up call for the West, highlighting that China's military technology should not be underestimated. The article's conclusion essentially urged the US to abandon its illusions, stating that Pakistan's victory was a triumph of Chinese military technology. No matter what excuses one might offer, the fact of India's crushing defeat cannot be ignored. Moreover, given Pakistan's size, it shouldn't realistically possess such combat capabilities. Some online rumors claim that India's defeat in the air battle was due to inadequate pilot training. However, this is completely off the mark. The entire air battle took place in beyond visual range BVR conditions, not in close-range dogfights, so pilot skills had minimal impact. Chinese radar systems were able to detect and lock onto Western fighter jets from over 140 kilometers away, far beyond the operational range of the French Rafale. After locking on, the system could guide missiles to the target via data links and use electronic jamming to prevent the enemy jets from realizing they were under threat. In such a scenario, no matter how skilled the pilots were, they had no chance to demonstrate their abilities. It was like being sniped from hundreds of meters away. Even the most proficient martial artist would be helpless. For Pakistani pilots, it was more like a shooting practice, highlighting that this was a defeat caused by technological inferiority not just of individual weapons, but of the entire combat system, a victory brought about by overwhelming technological superiority. And remember, these were the weapons China sold to Pakistan. China's domestic military equipment is even more advanced. China's J-10C fighter jet, for instance, is equipped with an active electronically scanned array ESA radar made from gallium nitride materials. In a video I released last year, I discussed the importance of the rare earth industry and non-ferrous metals for military applications, specifically mentioning gallium nitride-based radars. Compared to traditional radars, gallium nitride-based ones represent a generational leap. Just imagine how the world's most advanced Western fighter jets would fare against China's J-10C. It's no wonder they feel threatened. One of the key reasons for China's leading radar technology is its robust industrial production capacity. Many of the essential elements for these technologies are industrial byproducts. For example, gallium is a byproduct of the aluminum electrolysis process, which in turn requires a vast amount of electricity. The US has been struggling with power shortages. Just last week, the largest power grid company in the US issued a warning that the risk of electricity shortages this summer is rising, mainly due to aging power generation units nearing retirement and slow progress in building new ones. This has led to a continuous increase in electricity prices. As shown in this graph, US electricity prices have increased by 33% compared to 2025. Ultimately, it all boils down to control over resources and supply chains. These are the true sources of sustainable power. In addition to the air battle, another development deserves close attention. Pakistan claimed to have shot down 77 Indian drones within 2 days. Since the start of the Russia-Ukraine war, drones have played a pivotal role on the battlefield, and their significance cannot be overstated. China is undoubtedly far ahead in drone technology, and it now seems that China may also lead the world in anti-drone technology. Analysts believe that Pakistan used China's Silent Hunter laser air defense system. Its strength lies in its radar and algorithms. The system's chips and algorithms can quickly and accurately distinguish between friendly and enemy targets in complex electromagnetic environments, penetrate the satellite navigation jamming networks set up by India, and complete a strike within 6 seconds. Why is it named Silent Hunter? It utilizes high-energy laser beams to quickly burn through the critical components of drones, operating completely silently. Compared to missiles, this method is extremely cost-effective. As we all know, a single missile can cost millions of dollars, while drones are much cheaper, often just tens of thousands of dollars. Using a missile to shoot down a drone is simply uneconomical, even if the interception is successful. In contrast, the cost of using laser technology is significantly lower, mainly just the cost of electricity. It's important to remember that China's most advanced weapons are highly classified. Take the 6th-generation fighter jet as an example. No one had seen or even heard of it before its test flight. China's weapons manufacturers are state-owned enterprises, and their primary goal is not profit-making. They don't need to exaggerate data for marketing purposes. In fact, for the leaders of these state-owned enterprises, there's no personal benefit tied to the company's profitability. On the contrary, if there's a discrepancy between the actual product and the claimed data, they could face serious consequences. Western arms companies, on the other hand, are privately owned. For their CEOs, the stock price is paramount. By the time their products face actual combat, they may have already moved on to another job, having already pocketed their earnings. This fundamental difference between China and the US is crucial. The real-world testing of Chinese weapons on the global stage has provided significant military support for the Chinese yuan. Another important pillar is gold. Gold is a unique metal. It represents credit and is the only asset universally recognized by people around the world, transcending race, religion, and even civilization. Think about it. Thousands of years ago, when civilizations on different continents were isolated from each other, they all regarded gold as a symbol of wealth and power, and this perception remains unchanged today, highlighting the special nature of gold. Many people ask me about Bitcoin. Some compare Bitcoin to digital gold, but it's essential to note that Bitcoin is man-made, while gold is a product of nature. Gold is formed through the most extreme physical processes in the universe, such as supernova explosions or neutron star collisions, catastrophic events that give birth to this precious metal. In contrast, creating a new Bitcoin is as simple as using copy and paste commands Ctrl-C plus Ctrl-V, clearly showing that they are not comparable. Once you understand the significance of gold, China's actions in recent years become even more remarkable. The People's Bank of China (PBOC) has been actively purchasing gold. In April, China's gold reserves increased by approximately 70,000 ounces, reaching a record high 73.8 million ounces. This marks the 6th consecutive month of gold purchases, with a cumulative increase of about 1 million ounces, or 30 tons. Since 2022, the PBOC's total gold reserves have surged by 11 million ounces, and the proportion of gold in China's foreign exchange reserves has now reached a record 8%. Why is China buying so much gold? Some argue that China is doing this to avoid using maturing US treasuries to buy the yuan, as that could force the yuan to appreciate, which is not conducive to exports. I believe this understanding is completely wrong. If China wants to prevent the yuan from appreciating, it could simply use dollars to buy European bonds instead of necessarily purchasing gold. In my view, these gold purchases are preparations for the restructuring of the international monetary system. The goal isn't to peg the yuan directly to gold, which would be short-sighted. Instead, gold is being used to pave the way for the yuan. Not many people may have noticed this news. According to the South China Morning Post, the Shanghai Gold Exchange is considering opening overseas gold delivery warehouses, with the first one planned for Hong Kong. This is a significant move because it means that offshore yuan can now be exchanged for gold. People often mention China's foreign exchange controls, but that becomes less relevant when the yuan can be exchanged for gold, a more trustworthy asset compared to paper currencies like the dollar or euro. Following Hong Kong, I expect China to open another overseas delivery warehouse in the Middle East, either in Saudi Arabia or the United Arab Emirates. This would serve as a special guarantee for Middle Eastern countries, indicating that physical gold would be under the sovereignty of Saudi Arabia or the UAE, allowing these countries to freely exchange yuan for gold. This would effectively link oil to the yuan, which is what I mean by using gold to support the yuan's internationalization. In the future, China may also set up a gold delivery warehouse in ASEAN countries, integrating ASEAN into the yuan-centered system. The goal here isn't just to internationalize the yuan, but also to compete for the right to price gold. China is both the world's largest gold producer and consumer. There's no reason why the London and New York exchanges should monopolize gold pricing. The Shanghai Gold Exchange has its own advantages. For instance, the Shanghai Gold Exchange prices gold bars in kilograms, while the London Exchange uses ounces. The standard gold bars in the London market weigh for 100 ounces, and gold futures in New York are also priced in ounces. However, most countries around the world are more accustomed to using kilograms. This gives the Shanghai Gold Exchange an opportunity to compete for the gold pricing power along the Belt and Road routes, which is also a foundation for decoupling the yuan from the dollar. Currently, the yuan's exchange rate is still influenced by the dollar. To maintain the stability of the yuan's exchange rate, in practice, it often means stabilizing the yuan-dollar exchange rate, which keeps China somewhat constrained. For the yuan to truly become independent, it must decouple from the dollar, and gold will play an indispensable role in this process. The yuan now has two crucial supports: military strength and gold. That's why I believe this year could see a major breakthrough in the internationalization of the yuan. What comes next is to succeed in the trade battles, demonstrating to the world which country is the largest economy. We need to make it clear who the dominant player is, and then steadily promote the decoupling of the yuan from the dollar with domestic economic needs at the core. We shouldn't pursue internationalization for its own sake. As long as we remain patient, time is on China's side.